No game has impacted the stealth genre quite like Metal Gear Solid, and while I could argue Hitman is a close second, at least for me, there's no doubt that Metal Gear Solid is one of the pioneers of stealth gaming. I love these games, well, most of these games, and I thought it'd be fun to rank every canon Metal Gear game I've played. So, to my knowledge, I got every single one except Rising, which I'm not sure is actually canon. If I'm wrong, yell at me quietly in the comments, please. And Portable Ops. I never finished that one either, so it won't be on the list. But anyways, we have 9 games to go through. If you like the video and want to see more of what I've done, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss another list, and let me know in the comments below your list and your favorite game in the series. With that being said, let's get right into it. So coming in at the bottom of the list at number 9 is Metal Gear Solid Ground Zero from 2014. While technically this is included with 5 now, it came out solo in 2014, and it was $40, which is honestly atrocious considering this game was basically a glorified tech demo. Now don't get me wrong, it played fine, the missions were good, but there were only 7 missions, clocking in at about 2 hours long at most. All in all, it was a disappointment. It should have been free. Maybe if they really wanted money for it, charge like $10 for like pre-order bonus content, anything but basically releasing it like a full standalone title. That's just wrong. The small map we get to traverse is good, and the variety on how you can go about the missions is pretty decent. Like I said, it plays fairly well, but it would never in any universe justify a $40 fucking price tag. So moving on to number 8, we have the one that actually started it all way back in 1987 with Metal Gear. Now granted, it's been a really long time since I played this one, and it was definitely way before my time by like a whole decade, but luckily for me, I did have an NES growing up. This was a game that blew me away with how in-depth this game felt, at least for the time it came out. This classic arcade stealth action-adventure game gave us the iconic Snake, going on a solo infiltration mission in a fortified state called Outer Haven to destroy Metal Gear, which is this giant walking tank, basically. Simple, yet awesome. This somewhat simple 80s game established so much of the core identity of the franchise from the get. While fairly basic compared to the rest of the series, it still had more of an in-depth story than most, if not all, games coming out in the 80s. Hell, even the 90s for the most part. Solid gameplay with the classic top-down view, starting the game unarmed until of course you acquire guns and equipment throughout the levels, going point A to B, with the goal of obviously not being noticed. For the time, this was honestly super sick, and while the enemy AI wasn't all that impressive, which is understandable for the age and the tech that they were going off of, it worked well enough, and even to this day I can say it is a pretty good time, but these other titles just do it better. Now at number 7, we have the sequel to the classic Metal Gear with Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake from 1990. Taking place a few years after the events of 1, Snake goes to a new heavily defended territory known as Zanzibar Land to destroy a revised Metal Gear. This game, while very similar to 1, honestly goes even harder with the story, being more involved than really any game of its time coming around again, showing us some of the horrors of warfare. Snake is great here, along with the rest of the cast of characters. Super in-depth and involved more than any game of its time. These two titles just kind of went off. The reason this game is higher than 1 is more because of the gameplay. The enemy AI is way more aware in this title, down to if you step on the wrong tile, you'll get noticed, giving us a chance to actually use our brain a little. You can crawl, kneel, crouch, and even hide, making stealth way easier and more accessible, while expanding the gameplay in a great way. For a game that's pushing 30 years plus, it's not that bad. Great story, awesome bosses, and levels. For the time this came out, it was badass. So coming in at number 6 is going to be Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker, initially from 2010 on the PSP and later released in HD in 2011. Taking place after 3, set in Costa Rica in 1974, following Snake as he runs a mercenary unit. While the story is okay, it's not great, at least not as great as the rest. While it changes up the formula a little bit, it's split into like 2 types of gameplay. One being missions and the other one being Mother Base. So missions is, well, missions. the actual meat of the game to progress the story, collecting objectives, fighting bosses, infiltrating. Then you have Mother Base, which is just really an army base management game. Playing similar to 4, it looks fairly good and it plays fine. There is better gunplay if you're tired of sneaking around, giving you more options. It's all around okay, not one I really come back to all that often. Honestly, it's been a minute. Though, would I recommend this title? Yeah, to be honest, I'd recommend most of these games on the list. They're all great in their own way. So at number 5, we have Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain from 2015. A fairly controversial title in the series amongst the fans, taking place many years after Ground Zero, which is in between 3 and 1, we follow punished Venom Snake as he ventures to Soviet-occupied Afghanistan and a little part of Africa to seek revenge on those who destroyed his forces, and even came close to offing him as well. First complaint I do have with this title is it takes a minute to get going, which I'm all for usually, but this time around I kinda just wanted to get to the meat of the game. I'll also just say out the gate, this is one of the weakest stories in the series. It's not awful, at least the first half, but still really lacking compared to the others. This game really focused more on gameplay, which this time around is pretty solid. While at times I think it's great, it just doesn't hit like it used to with the previous titles. I'm kinda iffy on this one. I like the open map and most of the gameplay. When it's good, it's great. You have stuff like enemies adapting to your tactics, like if you're constantly hitting guards with headshots, later down the line, soldiers will be wearing helmets, so you can't pop them as easy. If you hack a bunch of equipment, they'll start putting anti-hacking shit on the equipment, which is pretty cool as well. Make no mistake, this game is great a lot of the time, especially the first half. It just falls really hard in the second half, and it's probably only where it is on the list because of the gameplay. But if I'm being honest, this game would be 10 times better if they didn't change voice actors and if they focus more on the story. It feels like an unfinished game at times. It's still worth a play, especially if you haven't, but it's just an iffy title for me. So at number 4, it's gotta be Metal Gear Solid 4: Guns of the Patriots from 2008. Set a couple years after Metal Gear Solid 2 with elderly Snake, now just known as Old Snake, setting out on a mission to eliminate Liquid Snake before he takes control of the Sons of the Patriots, which is like an AI that can control activities of multiple private military companies worldwide. I'll say off rip, this is one of the more complex Metal Gear Solid stories. You have to play the previous games to even somewhat understand what's going on, so keep that in mind if you've never played this one. Hell, I even get confused on the story a lot of the times. It wraps up a lot of loose ends from the previous titles, basically serving as kind of an end to the story, in a way. Feeling like every game came together for one last go. It has an amazing story with some super long cutscenes. It clocks in at like movie length, being well over an hour long, which is pretty wild. So much gets dropped here, lots of revelations. It's just great. This series could have ended here for the most part, and I'd feel satisfied personally. Lots of callbacks, which is why it's very important to play the previous games, and while it's confusing, it does pay off in the end. Great progression throughout the story, and a great conclusion. Good gameplay, while stealth is a little more standard here, it still kicks ass. Cool equipment, we get the Octo suit here, which I love. It's a suit that blends to your environment depending where you are, whether you're in the dirt or up against a wall, but it's not like OP. The enemy AI isn't dumb. In a way, it's just a easy version of the camo system from Snake Eater. But it works, and it's super cool. The gunplay has been improved since 3, making it a little less stressful. If you get caught, you can at least have a fighting chance. Controls super good and holds up really well to this day. And in some days, it's in my top 3 because I love the way they handled the story. But these 3 just do it better for me. Coming in at number 3 is Metal Gear Solid from 1998. The classic. This is where I'd say most of the diehard fans got turned on to the series. For the time and console it was on, it was amazing, with people comparing it to a movie with how cinematic the story felt. Like I said way earlier in the video, for the longest time, games didn't have these like crazy wild ass stories, and Metal Gear has hit it out the park 3 times in a row up to this point, and it's amazing. And yes, this game compared to today's standards in terms of graphics do look a little cursed, a little crusty. And similar in gameplay, it might turn newcomers off the game, but once you sit down for a sec and get a feel for it, honestly, it works surprisingly well for its age. Still one of the most impressive and most cinematic games ever released on the PlayStation 1, no doubt. So we play as Snake, infiltrating a nuclear weapons facility to neutralize a terroristic threat from Foxhound on Shadow Moses Island in Alaska. It goes hard. The story feels unique, definitely high up on the list when it comes to the greatest video game stories ever told. For me, it never gets stale. The gameplay, while very classic, is super solid. The boss fights are some of the best. You get Psycho Manus reading your memory card off to you, pretending to read your mind. There's so much small, cool little details that make this game just feel like a national treasure. While I would love to see a good remaster of this game, it's honestly aged fairly well. Even if you're slightly curious about this game, it is a must-play classic. These last 2 were a hard pick, but you could probably guess where I'm going with it. At number 2, we have Metal Gear Solid 2: Sons of Liberty from 2001. Taking place after 1, the story revolves around the Big Shell, a massive offshore cleanup facility ran by a group of terrorists that call themselves the Sons of Liberty. They demand a crazy high ransom for the life of the President of the United States, as well as threaten to destroy the facility that would cause a wild and crazy environmental disaster if they don't get the funds. And I'm going to spoil something right now, but the game is over 20 years old, so, don't be shocked. We don't really play as Snake this time around, only in the beginning. We actually play as Raiden, which is kind of a bummer, in my opinion, especially when I first picked up this game. I was waiting for Snake to return, and he never did. So I, along with other people, were definitely a little mad, especially back then. Nowadays, I don't think people mind as much. I know I don't. It is a slight setback for me personally. I mean, Raiden's a good character, just a little annoying, I guess. But moving on, the game's story, like the first game, kind of go off. It aged super well. A little too well, as this game tackles themes that we're living through in present times. Themes like fake news, the informational age, mass conspiracies, and more. It's kind of wild how on the nose they were. The characters top-notch, the gameplay, while similar to 1, obviously, improved. Again, playing from a symmetric top-down view with the ability to aim in first person when shooting an enemy. Stealth, fire, controls, honestly very well for its age, kind of like 1. It's got its clunk to it, but that's to be expected. This game is amazing. Being the second game I played in the series, I fell in love with this game as a kid. And I still love it dearly today. This is another game I wouldn't mind a remaster for, but I don't think it's completely needed, which says a lot when you have a game this old. But there's still one game to talk about that does everything we talked about right in every single way, and it's probably not going to be the biggest hot take here. If it wasn't obvious already, my number 1 is going to be Metal Gear Solid 3: Snake Eater from 2004, my first Metal Gear Solid game. And I'm just now realizing that I tend to get into a series around the peak with Hitman or Assassin's Creed, Resident Evil, hell, even Saints Row or Mafia. I guess I just have good timing. But this is the fan favorite, so it's not really all too crazy that I put it at number 1, but how could you not? Set 31 years before the events of Metal Gear Solid 1, making this game a prequel to every game in the series. The story is centered around Fox Op, codenamed Naked Snake, as he attempts to rescue a Russian rocket scientist and sabotage an experimental superweapon while taking out the boss. That's a tall order, but one will fill, nonetheless. This game is the shit. Cinematically, it's a masterpiece. I'll just say that out the gate. With my favorite setting in the series, this 1960s jungle setting, as opposed to the usual cold-feeling facilities we're used to. The setting is even unique to the series, and I adore it. With its more open feel, amazing story, amazing characters and villains, bosses. I was about 7, I think, when I played this game, and it blew my tiny child brain away. And it still does, even as an adult to this day. It's a game that's very accessible, it's easy to get your hands on, and it's not the hardest one to play either. You don't need to understand the other games to play this one either, like all the story and stuff, making it one of the best games besides the original to jump into, if you're looking to get into the series. Has a perfect intro, from start to finish, it's perfect. Gameplay greatly improved from the first two while being similar, the stealth mechanics top-notch with the camo system that you use to help blend in with whatever environment you're traversing through, and it's a fun mechanic to mess with. The gunplay is pretty good, using the third person when roaming around and first person for shooting. Best to still not be seen in this game though, combat works well enough, but it has its moments. The details here are just flawless, especially with, like I said, the camo system, giving you a percentage on how covered you are, down to the health. The game remembers your injuries throughout the entire game, and it's super sick. Way ahead of its time. It's a fan favorite for a reason. It's 10 out of 10, most definitely recommend, especially if you're trying to get into the series and you haven't yet, and if you have been a fan, this is your sign to boot up the game again. While it's an easy choice for me, it couldn't be anything else. Some come very close, but there's just nothing like this gem, and I love it, and it's my number one. So that's my list, and I would love to know yours down in the comments below. What's your favorite Metal Gear Solid game? Let's talk Metal Gear in the comments below. If you made it this far in the video, thank you. You are awesome. Be sure to share, like, and subscribe to see more of what I've done and what's to come. Got some really cool ideas. Might take a small break on ranking videos. I don't know yet. I want to try and stream more. Maybe make it like a weekend thing. If that's something you want to see, let me know. But that's all I got for you today. Do the things. I'd greatly appreciate it. But anyways, thanks for coming, and thanks for watching.